You probably already have many of the materials necessary to teach the phonics strand within your Montessori environment. And the integrated scope and sequence includes explicit alignment with some of the most common Montessori materials. CKLA and the Montessori curriculum are similar in many ways. First, they both include explicit phonics instruction. Montessori was ahead of its time in this practice. Also, CKLA introduces letter sounds before introducing letter names, just as the Montessori curriculum has traditionally done. There are many elements within Montessori that are not included in CKLA. However, that's the purpose of the integrated scope and sequence. We emphasize teaching the content in CKLA skills through Montessori practices. For example, CKLA does not have any hands-on materials, such as the sandpaper letters, the movable alphabet, or three-part cards. But we have been sure to include these within the scope and sequence so that we're staying true to our Montessori practices. Within the scope and sequence, we have drawn explicit alignment with three of the most common Montessori materials for teaching phonics: the Washika Reading Program, the Pink, Blue, Green Language Series, and the materials based on Muriel Dwyer's work, including the red phonogram spelling folders. Please note that because the Pink, Blue, Green Language Series is published by many different companies and individuals, there is a great deal of variation within the skills that are taught. We used the versions available from Allison's Montessori in our alignment, but you may need to check to see what you have in your environment. In the scope and sequence documents, you will see materials noted for each lesson within CKLA. Here we have an example from a kindergarten set on the left and a second grade set on the right. The first resource listed is always a printable from the online course. This is followed by traditional Montessori materials if they are available for that particular skill. And the last resource listed is the CKLA activity book pages for first and second grade. We did not include activity book pages in the kindergarten phonics sets. Although multiple materials may be included for one skill, this does not mean that children need to complete all of the activities. We wanted to provide options so that you can make decisions based on what you have in your environment and the needs of your children. Before printing resources from the online course, we recommend examining your environment to see what you already have, and then supplementing as needed with the resources from the online platform. The scope and sequence documents align the use of Montessori materials as much as possible. However, there are some differences about the content in CKLA and common Montessori materials that are important to note. First, some of the spelling patterns in CKLA simply are not found in common Montessori materials. Also, most Montessori materials don't address tricky spellings, which is when one spelling can represent a variety of sounds. For example, the letter S can be pronounced S or Z at the end of words. Another important difference is the order in which the spelling patterns are introduced. Oftentimes in Montessori materials, several spelling patterns for the same sound are introduced simultaneously. For example, multiple ways to spell the long E sound might be introduced at the same time. However, CKLA introduces the spelling for long E over the course of 3 years. CKLA takes into consideration how common the spelling pattern is and how consistent it is. For example, I, E, and Y are both spelling patterns for the long E sound, but they are also spelling patterns for the long I sound, making them tricky spellings and rather difficult for children to master. So these difficult patterns are not introduced until second grade. To address this challenge, the scope and sequence documents note which words from a particular Montessori material to use at a particular time. For example, when teaching a long E spelling pattern, it might say Dwyer Red Folders, E, but then note that you should only use the words with the EE, the E consonant E, and the EA spelling patterns, because those are the only ones children have learned thus far in the integrated scope and sequence. Also, some Montessori materials group spelling patterns differently than CKLA. For example, Dwyer's red phonogram spelling folders classify OO and EW as ways to spell the long U sound. However, CKLA says that these sounds are all slightly different and should be categorized separately. If you have any questions or comments about the alignment of Montessori materials with the content in CKLA Skills, please share them in the community section of our online course platform.